Meet Nomvula, a devoted nurse who sacrifices everything to support her family, leaving South Africa for a higher-paying job in the UK after her husband Thulani's business collapses. Month after month, she sends him 60% of her salary, trusting he will care for their 4 children and build the family project. But behind Nomvula, Thulani's was using her money in a reckless ways she never expected, and was with another lady. Then, one day, Nomvula returns unexpectedly, only to discover the shocking truth. Stay tuned, for what happens next will leave you speechless, but if it is your first time here, subscribe for more interesting life stories. Nomvula Mthembu was the epitome of success and balance. As a young nurse in South Africa, she had worked hard to build her career. Marrying Thulani, an ambitious businessman, seemed like the perfect complement to her life. Together, they envisioned a prosperous future for themselves and their children. Thulani's business thrived in the early years, allowing them to live comfortably. They built a modest home and started a family, welcoming 4 beautiful children: Sianda, Zanil, Thato, and little Lethabo. Life was rich with laughter and love, and they felt unstoppable. But the world has a way of testing even the strongest of bonds. One day, Thulani came home with heavy news. The business was collapsing. Market changes, bad investments, and an unfortunate series of events had led to its downfall. Nomvula, always the optimist, believed they could weather the storm. After all, they had faced hardships before, and each time they had emerged stronger. But this time was different. No matter how hard Thulani tried to revive the business, it continued to sink deeper into debt. Months passed, and the family's financial situation worsened. Nomvula had never seen her husband so broken. The man she once admired for his confidence and resolve was now a shadow of himself. Thulani, overwhelmed by failure, withdrew into himself. Bills piled up, creditors began knocking on their door, and the weight of their struggles threatened to suffocate them both. In an act of desperation, Nomvula sought out loans from the government. She took on multiple loans in hopes that they would be able to save what was left of Thulani's business. She believed in her husband's ability to bounce back, and her love for him pushed her to do whatever it took to keep their family afloat. But despite the extra funds, nothing worked. The business was beyond saving. The family was on the brink of bankruptcy, their dreams in ruins. Thulani, defeated and overwhelmed, began to distance himself even more, consumed by his own sense of failure. Nomvula, on the other hand, couldn't bear to watch her family crumble. She made a life-altering decision. She would leave her beloved South Africa and move to the UK to work as a nurse. It was the only way to secure a stable income and provide for their children. As she prepared for her departure, Nomvula reassured Thulani that this was temporary. "I'll be back," she promised, "and we'll rebuild everything together." With a heavy heart, Nomvula kissed her children goodbye and left for the UK, carrying the weight of their future on her shoulders. Life in the UK was not easy at first. Nomvula missed her family deeply, and the distance felt like an ocean of loneliness. But she reminded herself why she had come. The salary as a nurse in the UK was far better than anything she could earn back home, and soon she began sending money to Thulani every month. She sent him 60% of her earnings, more than enough to cover their expenses and support their 4 children. Thulani, however, was not the same man she had left behind. First, he was grateful for the support. He promised Nomvula that the money would be put to good use. He sent her pictures of a house-building project he claimed to be working on, showing her progress with each passing month. "Our new home will be ready soon," he assured her, painting the picture of a man who was rebuilding their life while she worked tirelessly in the UK. Nomvula, trusting her husband, felt relieved. She believed that, even though they were far apart, they were still working toward the same goal. Her long shifts as a nurse became more bearable knowing that Thulani and the children were taken care of, and that soon she would return to a life they had rebuilt together. But little did she know, Thulani had changed. Over time, Thulani started to live recklessly. The money Nomvula sent him was more than enough to maintain the household, but instead of being responsible, he indulged in luxuries. He began spending the money on lavish outings, expensive clothes, and nights out with friends. Worst of all, he started seeing other women. With Nomvula miles away, he felt free to live a double life, confident that she would never find out. Nomvula remained blissfully unaware. She was too far away, working tirelessly and sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of her family. The pictures of the house project kept her hopeful, and she believed Thulani was staying true to his word. She often dreamed of the day she would return to South Africa, expecting to find a loving husband, a beautiful new home, and a family waiting to embrace her. But fate had other plans. One day, after nearly 5 years away, Nomvula decided to return to South Africa for a surprise visit. She was eager to see her children, to finally step into the home Thulani had been building, and to embrace the life she had worked so hard to secure. Little did she know, what awaited her was not the happy reunion she had imagined, but the devastating truth of her husband's betrayal. Nomvula's heart raced with excitement as her plane touched down in Johannesburg. The 5 years she had spent in the UK had been long and difficult, but it was all worth it. She had worked tirelessly, saved and sacrificed, all to ensure that her family could thrive. The thought of seeing her children again filled her with overwhelming joy, and she couldn't wait to embrace them in her arms. But there was something else. The promise of the new house that Thulani had been sending pictures of for years. Nomvula imagined the house as a symbol of all their struggles paying off. This, she thought, was the beginning of their new chapter. As she made her way through the familiar streets of her hometown, she noticed small but significant changes. The neighborhood had grown in ways she hadn't expected. But one thing gnawed at her, a nagging feeling that she couldn't quite shake. Something felt off, even though everything seemed in place on the surface. Arriving at the address Thulani had given her, Nomvula's excitement quickly turned to confusion. Instead of a grand, completed home, she found herself standing before a partially constructed shell of a building. The walls were bare, the roof unfinished, and there was no sign of life. The house that Thulani had sent her pictures of was far from reality. 'Twas a lie. Her heart sank. How could this be? For years, Thulani had sent her progress photos, showing what she believed was the dream home they had always talked about. She stared at the empty frame of the house, her mind racing for explanations. Had something gone wrong with the construction? Or worse, had he been lying to her this whole time? Determined to get answers, Nomvula hurried to their old house, the one she had left behind. As she walked through the front door, she was met with an eerie silence. The children were not home, and neither was Thulani. But the house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt cold, disorganized, and abandoned. It was a far cry from the life she had imagined. Panic surged through her as she frantically called out for her children. Moments later, she learned that they were at a neighbor's house, spending time there while Thulani was out. Relieved that they were safe, Nomvula sat on the edge of the couch, waiting for her husband's return. She had 1,000 questions and an overwhelming sense of betrayal simmering beneath the surface. Something was terribly wrong. Several hours later, the door creaked open, and in walked Thulani, completely unaware of her return. His shock at seeing her was palpable, but his eyes quickly darted to the ground as guilt crept across his face. "Nomvula, I didn't know you were coming back," he stammered. "I wanted to surprise you," Nomvula replied, her voice trembling with controlled anger. "And I see I'm the one who's been surprised." Thulani swallowed hard, sensing the confrontation he couldn't avoid. Nomvula wasted no time. "Where is the house you promised me? The one you've been sending pictures of for years?" Thulani hesitated, struggling to come up with a lie. But there was nothing he could say to explain away the mess he had created. Nomvula's gaze hardened. "I trusted you, Thulani. I sent you nearly everything I earned. I sacrificed years of my life to give our family a better future. And this is what you've done with it." Thulani could only hang his head in shame as the full weight of his betrayal began to sink in. The confrontation had only just begun, but Nomvula's anger was building with every word that passed between them. The lies, the deceit, the wasted years. It was all unraveling before her eyes. Thulani sat in silence as Nomvula demanded answers. You had all this money, Thulani. What did you do with it? Where did it go? And why is this house still nothing but bricks and dust? He fumbled for words, trying to explain away his reckless behavior, but Nomvula was having none of it. She could feel the rage boiling inside her. She had spent years working in a foreign country, living away from her children, trusting her husband to do what was right for their family. And now, it was clear that he had betrayed her. I didn't know how to handle it, Thulani finally admitted. His voice barely a whisper. The business was gone and I felt like a failure. I started spending money on things to make myself feel better. I thought I'd eventually fix it. I thought I'd make yourself feel better. Nomvula interrupted, her voice incredulous. While I was sending you my hard-earned money, sacrificing everything. And what about these pictures you sent me? The house, was that all a lie too? Thulani shifted uncomfortably in his seat, guilt written all over his face. I paid someone to take those pictures. I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could eventually finish it. Nomvula's heart shattered at his words. Everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in, had been built on lies. But what she didn't know was that the worst was yet to come. Later that evening, as she wandered through their home in a daze, her neighbor, a close family friend, came by to check on her. The woman, sensing something was wrong, asked if Nomvula was okay. Without thinking, Nomvula told her everything. How the house was a sham, how Thulani had been lying to her. The neighbor hesitated, then glanced away uncomfortably. Nomvula. There's something else you need to know. Thulani. He's been seeing other women. It's been going on for a while now. Nomvula's breath caught in her throat. The betrayal cut deeper than she could have imagined. Not only had Thulani squandered their money, but he had also been unfaithful, something Nomvula never thought her husband would do. Everything she had sacrificed, everything she had trusted him with, had been destroyed. That night, as she lay awake, the weight of his betrayal pressed down on her like a heavy stone. But she wasn't broken. No, not yet. Karma was coming for Thulani, and she knew that soon he would face the consequences of his actions. Nomvula couldn't sleep that night, her mind racing with thoughts of betrayal. She replayed every moment from the last few years, every call, every text, every promise Thulani made about their future. All of it was a lie, but the worst part was the infidelity. Thulani hadn't just wasted her money. He had betrayed her trust in the most intimate way possible. Morning came too quickly, and with it, a steely determination grew inside her. She needed to confront Thulani once and for all. There would be no more half-truths, no more excuses. She needed to hear everything. As the children left for school, Nomvula found Thulani sitting at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee as if nothing had changed. But something had changed, everything had. Without waiting for him to speak, she sat across from him and met his eyes. We need to talk, Thulani. And this time I want the full truth. No lies, no excuses. Thulani sighed deeply, clearly dreading the conversation. Nomvula, I told you everything yesterday. I made mistakes. I spent money I shouldn't have. I lied about the house, but I thought. No, she cut him off, her voice sharper than she intended. That's not all of it, and we both know it. I know about the women. Thulani's face paled, and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What are you talking about? I spoke to our neighbor, Nomvula said, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and anger. She told me about your affairs, Thulani. While I was working myself to the bone in another country, you were cheating on me. How long has it been going on? How many women? Thulani remained silent for a moment, guilt flooding his features. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It's been going on for a while. I don't know how many, Nomvula. It wasn't about them, it was about me. I felt lost, like a failure. I didn't know how to handle it. Nomvula's heart broke all over again. The man she had married, the man she had sacrificed so much for. had not only lied and squandered their money but had also betrayed their marriage in the worst possible way. How had they gotten here? How had things gone so wrong? She stood up from the table, her hands shaking with fury. I gave you everything, Thulani. I trusted you. And this is how you repay me. With lies, with infidelity. How dare you? Thulani hung his head in shame, unable to meet her gaze. I'm sorry, Nomvula. I never meant to hurt you. Sorry, she spat, her voice full of disbelief. Sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't undo the lies, the betrayal. You've destroyed everything. Thulani reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her heart too wounded to accept any form of comfort from him. I don't even know who you are anymore, she said quietly, her voice heavy with sorrow. And honestly, I don't think I want to. She turned her back on him and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Thulani to sit alone with the weight of his actions. For the first time in years, Nomvula felt a sense of clarity. She didn't have all the answers and she didn't know what her next step would be. But one thing was certain. Thulani was going to face the consequences of his betrayal. In the days that followed, Nomvula kept her distance from Thulani. She was polite for the sake of the children, but every interaction with him felt like walking on broken glass. Inside she was shattered, but she was also determined not to let him break her any further. She had worked too hard to let Thulani's betrayal define her life. But she wasn't just going to walk away without a plan. No, karma was coming, and she was going to make sure Thulani felt every ounce of the pain he had caused her. The first step was simple. Nomvula stopped sending him money. Thulani had grown used to living off her salary, using her hard-earned income to fund his careless lifestyle. But now that would stop. She transferred her funds into a separate account, one that Thulani couldn't access. If he wanted to continue living comfortably, he would have to find another way. At first, Thulani didn't notice. He assumed it was a small glitch, a delay in the transfer. But as days turned into weeks and the money didn't come, he began to panic. Nomvula watched him with a cold satisfaction as he scrambled to figure out what was happening. Nomvula, there's something wrong with the account, he said one evening, trying to sound casual. The money hasn't come through. Nomvula barely looked up from her phone. Oh, I know, she replied, her tone icy. I stopped sending it. Thulani's face contorted in confusion and then fear. Why? Because I'm done being your bank, she said, standing up to face him. I'm done funding your lifestyle while you lie and cheat behind my back. Thulani's jaw clenched, anger flashing in his eyes. You can't just cut me off, Nomvula. How am I supposed to take care of the kids? I've already made arrangements for that, she replied calmly. The children will be fine. But you're on your own. As Thulani sputtered, trying to come up with a defense, Nomvula felt a surge of power. For the first time in years, she was in control. Thulani had taken so much from her. But now, it was her turn to take back what was rightfully hers. Thulani was drowning, both emotionally and financially. With no more money coming in from Nomvula, his carefully curated web of lies began to unravel. The affairs he had juggled so effortlessly became a burden, as he could no longer afford the gifts and lavish dinners he used to maintain his relationships. The women started pulling away, frustrated by his sudden change in fortune. His once confident demeanor began to crumble as the walls of his deception closed in on him. He had always prided himself on his charm, his ability to keep up appearances even when things were falling apart. But now he could no longer hide the truth. He was broke, and everything he had was built on lies. The house, the car, even the lifestyle he flaunted in front of Nomvula's friends and family. It was all smoke and mirrors, and now the mirrors were cracking. One day, Thulani received a call from one of the construction workers he had hired for the fake housing project he'd been pretending to build for years. Boss, the contractors are asking for their payment. You've been stalling for months. We need the money to finish the job. Thulani's heart sank. He had been sending Nomvula fake photos of the supposed house, claiming it was nearly done, all the while pocketing most of the money. Now the truth was catching up with him. Tell them I'll get back to them, he muttered, hanging up the phone. His head was spinning. Without Nomvula's money, he had no way of paying the workers, and soon they would come after him for the outstanding debt. He sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling utterly trapped. His life had spiraled out of control, and the weight of his lies was suffocating him. Every time his phone buzzed with a message, his heart raced, wondering if it was another person he owed money to or one of the women demanding his time. The chaos was becoming too much. But what hurt him the most deep down was the realization that he had pushed away the one person who had ever truly loved him, Nomvula. She had supported him, trusted him, even when everything else in his life was falling apart. And what had he done in return? He had betrayed her in the worst possible way. He felt a sickening pit in his stomach, knowing that his actions had destroyed their marriage. He had lost her, and for what? A string of meaningless affairs and a house that didn't even exist. The life he had built on lies was crumbling, and soon there would be nothing left. As he sat there in silence, the weight of everything finally hit him. He had taken Nomvula's love for granted, and now he had to live with the consequences. The unraveling of his life had begun, and there was no stopping it now. Nomvula wasn't a vengeful person by nature, but Thulani's betrayal had ignited a fire inside her. After cutting him off financially, she decided it was time to reclaim the life she had put on hold for him. She had sacrificed so much, her career, her savings, her trust, and now it was time to start focusing on herself and her children. In the meantime, Thulani's situation continued to spiral out of control. His debts were piling up, and he was quickly running out of options. The contractors became more aggressive in their demands, and creditors began to knock on his door, threatening legal action. The women he had once entertained wanted nothing to do with him now that he was broke. His once flawless charm had lost its luster, and he was left with nothing but the ruins of his poor decisions. One evening, just as the weight of his troubles seemed unbearable, Thulani received a letter in the mail. It was from the bank, notifying him that the property Nomvula had purchased for him had been sold by her. She had moved swiftly and decisively, selling off the fake project he had been pretending to build for years. The little bit of equity the property had left was now in her control. Thulani was furious, but he knew deep down that he deserved it. She had every right to take back what was hers, especially after all he had done. His only hope now was that Nomvula might still have a shred of forgiveness left in her heart. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that she had moved on. Then, one day, karma came knocking in the most unexpected way. Thulani received an eviction notice. The house he had once proudly called his own was being foreclosed upon. He had no more money to pay the bills, and with Nomvula gone, his safety net had disappeared. Desperate, he tried to reach out to her, leaving voicemail after voicemail, but she didn't answer. He knew she had every right to ignore him, but he needed her, now more than ever. He was running out of options and time. Finally, when all seemed lost, Thulani returned home one evening to find Nomvula standing in the living room, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on her face. She had come back, but this time it wasn't to save him. It was to witness the consequences of his actions firsthand. As Thulani stood before her, he realized that karma had indeed come full circle. The life he had so carelessly destroyed was gone, and now, he had to face the harsh reality of living with the aftermath. Nomvula stood in the living room, her presence commanding the space. She didn't say a word at first, but her silence spoke volumes. Thulani could feel the weight of her disappointment pressing down on him. He had always feared this moment, the day his web of lies would come crashing down, and now it was here, and there was no escaping it. Thulani stood frozen, struggling to find the right words to say, but none came. His once smooth-talking charm had deserted him. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the guilt and shame overwhelming him. Nomvula's eyes bore into him, not with anger, but with a deep, searing sadness that hurt more than any words ever could. "I trusted you, Thulani," she finally said, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I gave you everything I had, my money, my support, my love. And what did you do with it? You wasted it. You wasted me. Her words cut through him like a knife. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, but what defense could he possibly offer? The evidence of his betrayal was all around them, and no amount of excuses would change the fact that he had squandered everything she had given him. I sent you money every month, Nomvula continued, her voice rising slightly, the hurt now evident in every word. I trusted you to take care of the children, to build a home for us. But you betrayed me, Thulani. You took my sacrifices and threw them away for what? For other women. For lies. Thulani lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. The shame was unbearable. He had always thought he could juggle the lies, keep up the facade, but now everything was crumbling around him. His infidelity, his deceit, his recklessness, it had all been exposed. I'm sorry, Nomvula, he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. I don't know what I was thinking. Sorry. Nomvula's laugh was bitter, cold. You're sorry now, Thulani. After everything. After you've destroyed everything we built. She took a step closer, and Thulani felt the heat of her presence, the intensity of her emotions swirling in the air between them. I worked so hard for us, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I left everything behind to save this family, to save you. And this is how you repay me. Thulani felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had always prided himself on being in control, but now, faced with the full weight of his betrayal, he felt utterly powerless. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, his voice cracking. Nomvula shook her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. You can't fix this, Thulani. You've done too much damage. But I didn't come here for you. I came here for the children. They deserve better than this. She walked past him, her steps steady, and headed toward the door. Thulani's heart raced, panic setting in as he realized she was leaving. Nomvula, wait, he called after her. Please don't go. She paused at the door, turning to face him one last time. I'm not the one leaving, Thulani, she said, her voice firm. You are. With that, she walked out, leaving Thulani standing alone in the ruins of the life he had destroyed. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and heartache. Nomvula had wasted no time in filing for divorce, taking full custody of the children, and demanding the house be sold to settle the debts Thulani had accumulated. She was done with him, and this time there was no going back. Thulani watched helplessly as his life unraveled before his eyes. The house that he had once used to impress others, the car he had flaunted, even the fake construction project, everything was stripped away. He was left with nothing but his regrets and the realization that he had lost the one person who had ever truly loved him. Nomvula, on the other hand, thrived. With her UK nursing job and new financial freedom, she provided for the children and rebuilt the life she had always deserved. Her focus shifted entirely to them, ensuring they were well cared for and happy. The scars from Thulani's betrayal remained, but she was determined not to let them define her future. Meanwhile, Thulani faced the full force of karma. The contractors he had scammed sued him, forcing him into legal battles he couldn't afford. With no money and no one to turn to, he was evicted from the house he had once called home. His former mistresses, realizing he had nothing left to offer, abandoned him as quickly as they had appeared. The lavish lifestyle he had clung to for so long was gone, and Thulani was left with nothing but the painful consequences of his actions. One evening, as Thulani sat alone in a small, dilapidated apartment, the weight of his downfall fully settled in. He had lost everything, his family, his home, his dignity, all because of his greed and infidelity. The once confident man was now a shadow of his former self, haunted by the choices he had made. Nomvula's life, however, had taken a different path. She found peace and happiness in her new life with her children, free from the toxic influence of her past. She had learned to forgive herself for trusting Thulani, but she would never forget the lessons his betrayal had taught her. As for Thulani, he was a living example of the old adage, karma always comes full circle. And when it did, There was no escaping the reckoning that followed. Thank you for watching, but before you go, let's digest these moral lessons together. Again, we will love to see where you are watching from. Here are the moral lessons. True partnership in marriage requires sacrifice and support, especially during difficult times. Nomvula's willingness to take on extra work and sacrifice her own comfort to support Thulani shows the strength of love and commitment. Trusting and relying on each other in tough times builds a foundation for a strong family, but when one partner betrays that trust, it can lead to irreversible damage. Thulani's irresponsibility with finances shows how neglecting proper financial management can ruin lives. Money should be handled with care, especially when it's a shared family resource. Nomvula's loans were meant for the family's stability, but Thulani's mismanagement and extravagance highlight that financial trust is as important as emotional trust in relationships. Betraying the trust of a loved one can lead to long-term consequences, not only for the betrayer but for everyone involved, especially the family. Thulani's deceit in showing false construction updates and his betrayal with other women show how dishonesty ultimately leads to personal loss and disgrace. Nomvula's decision to work abroad to support her family reflects her independence and determination. Her journey shows the value of self-worth and the power of resilience in tough situations. No matter how loyal or supportive one is, self-respect is essential. Nomvula learned her worth through her hard work and ultimately reclaimed her dignity by refusing to accept Thulani's betrayal. When confronted, Thulani's failure to take accountability for his actions shows the importance of personal responsibility. Avoiding responsibility and blame leads to further downfall. Recognizing one's own mistakes and genuinely working to correct them is the first step to personal growth and avoiding future regrets. A person's choices affect not only their own life but also their family and legacy. Thulani's actions caused hardship for his wife and children, impacting the family's reputation and stability. Our actions leave a lasting impact on those around us, especially family. Making wise choices and treating loved ones with respect create a legacy of love and trust. Karma has a way of catching up. Thulani's downfall, due to his lies and betrayal, serves as a reminder that we reap what we sow. Choosing honesty and integrity over deception is essential because, eventually, the consequences of betrayal will catch up. Nomvula's resilience in the face of betrayal and hardship demonstrates the strength of character. Her ability to rise above her challenges is a testament to her inner strength and dedication to her children. Adversity can either break us or make us stronger. Nomvula's perseverance serves as an inspiring example of resilience and the ability to rebuild after hardship. True happiness is found within oneself, not through the actions or validation of others. Nomvula's ultimate contentment came from her independence and her children, not from Thulani's approval or validation. Self-love and reliance on one's own values and worth are the keys to lasting happiness, especially when others let us down. Nomvula's decision to move on with her children reflects the importance of forgiveness, not necessarily for others, but for oneself to find peace and closure. Letting go of past grievances and moving forward enables one to build a new life, free from resentment and bitterness. Forgiveness is the first step to personal healing and growth.